someone in your life has suddenly become distant. Messages that once came easily now feel rare. Conversations that once flowed naturally now feel quiet. And the strangest part is this. Your intuition keeps telling you that something deeper is happening. Because when someone distances themselves without explanation, most people assume the obvious. They think interest disappeared. They think the connection simply faded. But Carl Jung believed something very different. Sometimes distance appears not because feelings are weak, but because they are stronger than a person knows how to handle. And once you understand this psychological truth, the silence between you begins to make sense. You may have already felt this. That subtle tension, that strange sense that something important remains unfinished. Almost as if the connection did not disappear. It simply moved somewhere deeper. So before we go further, take a quiet moment and pay attention to the person who just appeared in your mind. Because the reason they distance themselves may not be what you think. Welcome to the Shadow Self. If this message resonates with you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the deeper meanings behind human behavior. Now let's begin with something most people misunderstand. When someone pulls away suddenly, the common explanation is simple. They lost interest. But the human psyche rarely works in such a clean and logical way. Carl Jung spent much of his life studying the hidden forces inside the human mind. He discovered that many of our most powerful emotions operate beneath conscious awareness. They exist in what he called the unconscious. And when emotions emerge from that deeper layer of the mind, they can feel overwhelming. Sometimes even frightening, because strong emotional recognition has the power to disrupt the life someone believes they are supposed to live. Think about this for a moment. You meet hundreds of people in your lifetime. Most interactions are pleasant, brief, and forgettable. But once in a while, someone appears who feels different. Conversation feels effortless. Understanding happens without explanation, and a strange sense of familiarity begins to grow. Carl Jung once wrote that when two personalities meet, it is like two chemical substances coming into contact. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This transformation is not always comfortable, because real connection has a way of revealing parts of ourselves we did not expect to confront. When someone suddenly distances themselves after feeling this kind of recognition, it often means they are experiencing an inner conflict. On one side of their mind, they feel the connection. They sense the emotional pull. They recognize that something meaningful is happening between you. But on the other side, something inside them becomes uneasy, because deep emotional recognition activates the shadow. Jung described the shadow as the hidden side of the personality. It contains feelings, desires, fears, and truths that a person has never fully acknowledged. When someone meets a person who naturally brings these hidden parts to the surface, the experience can feel destabilizing, not because the connection is negative, but because it reveals something real. And reality demands awareness. Imagine someone who has built their identity around control. They prefer predictable relationships. They follow routines that make them feel safe. Their life is structured, stable, and familiar. Then suddenly they encounter someone who makes them feel deeply seen, not through effort, not through performance, but naturally. This type of recognition is powerful, and it can also be terrifying, because once someone experiences emotional clarity, they cannot easily return to the comfort of emotional distance. This is where distance often begins. not because the connection is weak, but because it is strong, enough to awaken parts of the mind that were previously hidden. Carl Jung once said something remarkably simple: "What you resist persists." This means that emotions we try to suppress do not disappear. They grow stronger beneath the surface. When someone distances themselves from a powerful connection, they may believe they are protecting themselves. They might tell themselves the situation is too complicated. They might convince themselves the timing is wrong. They might focus on responsibilities, routines, or expectations that already exist in their life. But the unconscious mind does not operate through logic. It operates through emotional truth. And emotional truth has a way of returning again and again until it is acknowledged. This is why distance sometimes feels strange. You may notice moments when thoughts of this person appear unexpectedly. You might be focused on something completely unrelated, and suddenly, their presence crosses your mind. Many people dismiss this as coincidence, but Jung believed something deeper was happening. When two people share an unresolved emotional connection, the psychological energy between them does not simply vanish. It remains active beneath the surface, in subtle ways, quiet ways, almost invisible ways. This is why emotional distance often carries tension. Even silence can feel charged. Even absence can feel meaningful, because the connection has not truly disappeared. It has simply moved into the unconscious. Now consider the internal struggle the other person may be experiencing. They feel the connection, but they may not understand it. They might ask themselves questions they cannot easily answer. Why does this person affect me so strongly? Why does thinking about them change my mood? Why does being around them feel both comforting and unsettling at the same time? These questions create psychological resistance, and resistance often produces distance, because distance feels like control. If they step back, they believe they can calm the emotional intensity. If they create space, they believe the feelings will fade. But here is what usually happens instead. The mind returns to what it cannot resolve. Carl Jung explained that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will guide our behavior without our awareness, and we will call it fate. This means that when someone distances themselves from a powerful emotional recognition, they often continue thinking about it privately, quietly, without speaking about it. They replay conversations in their mind. They remember small details. Moments that seemed ordinary at the time begin to carry meaning later. And this creates the strange dynamic many people experience: distance on the outside, but emotional presence on the inside. This is the psychological paradox of suppressed connection. The more someone tries not to feel something, the more attention the feeling receives in the unconscious. That tension begins to influence their inner world. They might feel restless in relationships that once felt stable. They might notice a quiet sense that something in their life feels incomplete. They may not openly connect these feelings to you, but the emotional recognition remains. Carl Jung believed that certain relationships appear in our lives not simply for companionship, but for awakening. They reveal something important about who we are becoming. These relationships act like mirrors. They reflect hidden parts of our personality. Sometimes these reflections are beautiful. Sometimes they are uncomfortable, but they always carry meaning. This is why certain connections feel impossible to forget, because they were never meant to remain superficial. They were meant to reveal something deeper about the self. You may have noticed changes in your own awareness since meeting this person. Perhaps your understanding of relationships has shifted. Perhaps you notice emotional depth more clearly than before. Maybe you find yourself less interested in shallow attention, less willing to accept connections that feel incomplete. This is the quiet effect of psychological awakening. Real recognition changes how we see ourselves and how we see others. Distance, in many cases, becomes part of that transformation, because transformation rarely happens comfortably. Growth often begins with uncertainty. Both people involved in the connection are adjusting internally, learning, reflecting, becoming aware of emotions they had not previously explored. Carl Jung described this process as individuation. It is the psychological journey of becoming fully aware of one's inner truth. And sometimes another person becomes the catalyst for that journey. But here is an important truth. Not every awakening relationship is meant to immediately become a life partnership. Some connections arrive primarily to expand awareness, to reveal emotional capacity, to challenge old beliefs about love, identity, and connection. And that revelation alone can permanently change both people involved. The distance you experience may actually be part of this deeper process, because when someone becomes aware of powerful emotions, they often need time to understand them. They may need to question the life they have built. They may need to confront expectations they once accepted without thought. That internal work cannot be rushed. It unfolds slowly, often privately, but eventually something shifts. People cannot ignore emotional truth forever. They either choose to face it, or they retreat back into comfort. Both choices reveal clarity. And this is why the most important step for you is not chasing answers. It is remaining grounded in your own awareness. You cannot force someone to confront their inner world. That journey belongs to them. What you can do is honor the insight this connection has already given you, because something inside you has changed. You have seen what genuine recognition feels like. You have felt the difference between ordinary attraction and deep emotional alignment. That awareness is valuable. It sharpens your intuition. It helps you recognize relationships that truly nourish you, and it protects you from settling for connections that feel empty. Carl Jung believed that awareness is the beginning of real freedom. When you become conscious of your emotional truth, you stop chasing illusions. You stop forcing outcomes. You begin trusting your own inner guidance. This is the quiet power of psychological awakening. It changes how you move through the world. You become calmer, more observant, less desperate for answers, because you understand something important. What is truly meant for you does not require manipulation. It unfolds naturally when both people are ready to meet each other honestly, and readiness cannot be forced. It emerges through growth, through self-reflection, through the gradual courage to live authentically. Until that moment arrives, distance may remain. But distance does not erase meaning. Sometimes it simply allows two people to grow separately before they understand what the connection was truly meant to teach them. And that brings us to a final insight Carl Jung often emphasized. The purpose of awareness is not control. It is understanding. When you understand the deeper psychological patterns behind human behavior, silence no longer feels confusing. Distance no longer feels like rejection. Instead, it becomes information. It becomes part of the story unfolding between two evolving individuals. So if someone has suddenly distanced themselves from you, do not rush to interpret it as loss. Instead, ask a quieter question. What truth might this connection be revealing inside both of us? Because sometimes the most meaningful relationships do not begin with certainty. They begin with awakening. And once awakening begins, the path forward reveals itself slowly, through awareness, through growth, and through the quiet courage to live honestly with what the heart already knows.